So my name is Myriam. I am originally from Burgundy in France. I've been living in the UK since 2012. I had a pretty lovely life here in Leigh-on-Sea. My husband was from London, but we couldn't afford to buy anything, so we decided to move this end because we both love the sea. And we really wanted a quieter lifestyle for our family. We had been speaking about having children, and actually I found out that I was pregnant a month before I got married. So that was a really nice surprise. So we didn't know at the time that it was a twin pregnancy, but we were very happy, very excited to get married and then welcoming a baby 9 months later. And when we returned from our wedding in Tenerife, which was the most beautiful wedding, better than I could have imagined, we had a scan. We had a 12-week scan in Southend Hospital, and we found out that it was a twin pregnancy. And I remember vividly that my husband was so happy that he actually stood up and he started dancing, and the person performing the scan had to tell him to calm down because we were in a very small room, and we were very happy, very, very happy. And we spoke about the twins. I think immediately the reaction was being ecstatic that we were not going to have one baby but two. So we just speculated on the gender. We were wondering if we were going to have two girls or two boys or one of each, and we were thinking through which scenario would be best, and we couldn't agree on which scenario was going to be best. We were just very happy to welcome twins in our lives, and everything was fine. I felt good. I had no issues with the pregnancy. The beginning of the pregnancy, I was actually buzzing. But then at week 17, I visited my family in France, and I just thought, oh, actually, I can't wait. I just can't wait for the scan in Southend. I've got to go and have a private scan and see what gender my babies are. And so I booked a private scan. It's not very costly in France, so I thought, I better check. And so I just took my mom, and I thought, let's go and see the babies. And I was desperate to text my husband and let him know the results, because we had been speculated about the gender so much. And I remember the doctor in France telling me that, it's unlikely that you will find anything wrong, that for this type of pregnancy. So my twins were not in the same, how do you call that? They were in separate, I have the word in English. Yeah, they were not together. They were non-identical. So there was the risk was less than if they were identical. So, and he thought, well, you're of young age and you're looking after yourself, and so I think the scan, I will perform the scan and things should be fine. And actually, he started by telling me, I can't remember the order now, but he said, you're gonna have a boy and a girl. So I was actually very happy, one of each. And I thought, oh gosh, I can't wait to just be able to leave this room and tell James about it. And he started by scanning my daughter, and everything was fine. From what he could see, everything looked normal. And I think the last thing that he scanned for my daughter was the size of her limbs. And so he started with the size of the limbs for my son. The last thing he did for my daughter is the first thing that he did for my son. And I remember him going completely quiet when it was quiet, silence. I remember thinking, oh gosh, that's really odd, because this doctor was very enthusiastic a minute ago, and now he's very quiet. And he told me, I'm gonna be quiet for 5 minutes. I just need to check something. And I had this feeling that something was wrong. And after 5 minutes, it seemed like it was a lot longer. He told me that the size of my son's limbs was abnormal, and so I thought, oh, he must have a type of dwarfism. But very quickly after, he told me, oh my God, yes, this is very abnormal. We will have to discuss all the options, but this could be a condition incompatible with life. So that was really brutal, because I had no idea. To me, like, having small limbs, of course, initially this was a shock, but I thought, well, if the baby is otherwise healthy, then of course it's gonna take an adjustment from my side, because I thought that I was gonna have a healthy baby. I may have a baby that's different, but having a baby who is different is not a bad thing. But immediately after, he said, this might be a condition incompatible with life. We need to do some genetic testing, and your husband has to travel here, because we need to test him as well. And gosh, like, even thinking about it now, like, it was 5 years ago now, almost, my head still spins at the situation. I just left the room, and I burst into tears, and I told my mom, what am I going to do? How am I going to say that to James? So I called my husband, and I said, you've got to come here. There's an issue with with one of the babies, and you need to come here. We need to get tested. I don't know exactly what it is, but they're talking to me about a condition that's incompatible with life. And I think he was as confused as I was. So things moved pretty quickly. The scan was on September 11th, and we did all the tests that we could do. And then I had to return to the UK. I think I stayed about 3 weeks. It took me about 3 weeks to actually be well enough within myself to actually make it back to the UK. So James had to go back earlier. And on October 14th, so not too long after, we received an email and a phone call from the doctor that said, yes, we tested, and your son has a condition called thanatophoric dysplasia, which is an extreme form of dwarfism, where the limbs don't grow, but also the brain doesn't develop. So, there's an excess of liquid in the baby's brain, which means that if the baby was to survive, it would never be able to walk, would never be able to talk, would never be able to breathe. All these things that a normal baby would do, a baby with this condition would never be able to do. So we were absolutely devastated. I can't even describe the level of devastation of having a pregnancy that goes so wrong, but yet having the joy of having a healthy girl, but the devastation of knowing that our son was not going to make it. We actually decided to move back to France, because we felt that the level of care was going to be higher, because we had started this journey with the team over there. They knew everything, and it was all in my own language as well. I can't fault Southend Hospital. I just felt more comfortable moving my care back home, and we thought we would move there for 6 months. I wanted to have the support of my family as well, because I knew at this point that it was very unlikely that my baby was going to make it past birth alive. So we had to move, and it was very hard. We loved our lives our life here in Leoncy. James had to quit his job and start over in a foreign country. I had to hold the guilt of making him move, even though this was a joint decision, and actually that was his idea. He said, I think we would be better off in your country, having all the explanation in your language. I think you will feel more comfortable, more supported. So we moved there in November, so everything went very quickly. We moved there in November. We stayed at my mom's for a bit, and then the day I received the keys to our new flat, this is a flat that my family had to choose for us because we didn't have time to just go and look at places. My family picked a flat for us based on loose criterion that I gave them, and the day I received the keys to the flat, I remember like having pain, sharp pain, like cramping, and the landlord said, "Oh gosh, you don't really look well. I think you should call someone. You don't look well." So I called my mom and I said, "Oh, I don't know. I've got some cramping, and it can't be birth. It can't be labor just yet. Like I still had like almost 3 months of pregnancy to complete. So I thought this can't be birth. It will be okay." And my mom said, "Okay, just let's leave this place. Let's go back home and rest." And the cramps kept on coming back, which later I found were contractions. And they told me, you are in active labor. Which my mom rushed me to the hospital and they said, "You are in active labor." They did everything they could to stop the labor from happening. So I had to take a lot of pills to stop the labor from happening. And it stopped the contractions for a bit, I think for a few hours. I had loads of conversations within that time with the medical team, and the medical team told me, "Yeah, your son is still alive. It's unlikely that it's going to make it past birth, and we don't know if your daughter is going to survive because it's very early." So I actually didn't even translate for my husband. I just sat there, and I think I completely switched off. It was so much emotionally that I had this little switch, and I thought, no, I need to be laser focused because I need to deliver these babies. And labor started again in the middle of the night, and my twins were born in the following afternoon, and they were born almost 3 months earlier than predicted. They were meant to be born on February 29th, and they were born on December 13th. So yeah, a good 2.5 months earlier than expected. My son died during labor, 2 hours before the end of labor. My son died. So I had to deliver my babies knowing that one of them was not alive anymore, which was probably the toughest thing I had to do in my life. And in all this time, I think the most difficult thing for me was to prepare for the arrival of my daughter whilst also preparing for my son's funeral. So I remember going to the cemetery and picking a plot and picking flower arrangements. Like preparing a funeral whilst you're still pregnant is really strange. I can't describe. It's just an experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone. That life and death can coexist in the same place at the same time. It is an odd situation to be in. And Layla spent 2.5 months at hospital. It was very complicated for her as well. I was told that she was going to have a lot of issues, and thankfully she will be 5 in December, and she's the most amazing child. She is very healthy and she keeps me going. So that's the story of the pregnancy. Unfortunately, like, we had quite an extraordinary life, not in a good way, because my husband also passed away during the pandemic. So I was not recovered from the loss of our baby, and that I had to deal with another tragic loss. My husband got diagnosed with a brain tumor end of 2021 and passed away within 5 weeks. So I lost a lot in a short space of time.
Wow, Myriam, oh, you're so brave to tell this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gosh, where to start? I mean, how are you feeling now? Like bring it all back up again. Have you had the chance to speak about it often, or?
I try to be as open as I can be about grief because I think it's such an important topic. I'm worried that my story hasn't come across the way I want, because the emotions, I can feel myself getting emotional just thinking about it again. I think what was the most difficult for me as twin mom is the fact that I had a surviving twin, and that my loss was overlooked, massively overlooked, and my loss is still very much overlooked because I lost my husband. And so when I speak about my emotional distress, people automatically assume this is linked to James's passing. And I've had opportunities to talk about James and to share his story, but I have never really had the opportunity to share my son's story. His name was Rafael. He really much existed, but sometimes I wonder if he will ever exist for anyone else. He obviously very much existed in James's life, and we talked about it often. But I lost this opportunity to talk about it as much as I would like to, because the person who felt the loss as much as I did died as well. So that's isolating. Sorry, that's very isolating to be in that situation. And I immediately, people have said to me, well, at least you have another baby. At least you've got another baby. And this is a sentence I've really hated, because yes, I have another baby and she's healthy and she's gorgeous and she's amazing. But first of all, she was a very tiny baby whose life was at risk. And I also I felt like I had lost a piece of myself and no one wanted to hear about it. My family, my mom and sisters got to meet Rafael and James's parents as well, so I can talk about my loss with them. But I think it takes someone else who experienced that type of loss to truly understand what it feels like. And I was very fortunate at that time that I met with Sharon, who is one of the founders of Footprints Baby Loss, and she had put me in touch with one of her befriender, and I spoke to this amazing woman whose name is Lucy, and she had twin girls, and one of them passed away as well. And so we could exchange on what it felt like to have a surviving twin, and this support was invaluable, to the point of me wanting to get involved and do the same for others. So I have found a lot of healing by supporting other moms and validating how they felt, because I felt completely lost and alone. And yeah, I feel that there's no recognition. When it comes to baby loss, there's no recognition of the loss. People often assume that because we haven't gotten to know someone, that we wouldn't be able to miss them. I had people telling me, why would you miss someone you've never spoken to? But he was my baby and I carried him and I had to deliver him and I had to bury him. And that's a type of pain that no parent should have to experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you want to say? What's the message that you'd want to say to those parents, perhaps who a few years behind you and have just very recently been through it, what would you want to say to them?
I'd want to say to them that there are people out there that are ready to support. And I know for the case of twin loss, it is such a specific type of loss as well, twin or triplet loss, because we have to sometimes life and death have to coexist at the same time, and we have to keep going. And I know for singleton losses, it must be the same in many ways, that if you have all the children, you have to keep going for your children. But I would say that it's very important to prioritize your mental health, connect to like-minded people, just find an organization that can offer support, talk to people that have gone through a similar experience, that can give you hope. I'm not here to sell hope to people and to just say that the pain will disappear, because the pain will exist. I think will forever exist. I think that somehow we find a way to lighten the load by sharing. This is the most powerful thing that I have been able to do, is sharing my story, talking to other people in distress, in similar situations. There has been the most profound healing. And of course, like Footprints, this organization is absolutely amazing, and I have made many friends, and I can only recommend to just connect and find a befriender if you feel comfortable talking about your loss. And I also want to emphasize that the topic of loss is a topic that people aren't comfortable talking about. I think we're very death avoidant in our society, and people will probably hear hurtful comments. I wish I could make them stop, and maybe that's a message for people who haven't lost a baby, but are supporting a person who has lost a baby. Please do not start sentences by "at least," because nothing that's going to come after this "at least" will be of any benefit to the person receiving the comment. Most of the time, parents just want to be heard. This is not a problem to fix. And I think we need to stop shying away from a topic that's a universal topic. We're all going to die. Some deaths are less natural than others, and I think losing a baby definitely isn't natural. This shouldn't happen. But if you know someone who has lost a baby, do not silence their grief. Speak to them, be open. Do not try to comfort them by saying that they should be grateful for what they have, because they are grateful for what they have, but they're also sad that they have lost a piece of themselves. And I think it's about accepting that joy and sadness can coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think oftentimes we are overloaded with positivity messages. That doesn't work for grievers. That doesn't work for bereaved parents. The nicest things that I've received in my life were simple things. I have a friend who wrote a letter to my child, to Rafael. She wrote a letter to Rafael on his birthday, which is also Leila's birthday. So she wrote a letter to Leila, but she also wrote a letter to Rafael, talking about how amazing Leila is and talking about me. And I found it incredibly moving. I couldn't thank this friend enough for the gesture. It may have felt like a small thing to her, but it meant the absolute world for me, that she remembered to honor my son on such a difficult day for me.
Yeah. Myriam, what would you say is what needs to be done to raise more awareness to people at the moment that perhaps don't understand and don't fully understand? What still needs to be done?
I think we have lots of amazing organizations that try to raise awareness. I would actually encourage people to speak up about their experiences. I think I had read a statistic about baby loss or miscarriages. I can't exactly recall with precision, but I think it was 1 in 4 women will experience a loss, and 1 in 4 women is not insignificant. This is massive. So I would encourage people to just speak up about their experiences. Don't diminish your own experience. Your loss is valid. The fact that you haven't gotten to know your baby or held your baby for very long or held your baby at all doesn't mean you're not grieving. And I think that's something that we need to be better at in society in general, accepting that death is a part of life, and making sure that we don't silence people's grief. And often wonder, why is it that we make such a massive fuss when a baby is born, but when a person passes away, it has to be a very silent process. People have to return to normal very quickly, and you almost get like a badge of honor if you can just power through and not talk about it. That is not the way people heal. And the fact that bereaved parents aren't talking about their loss doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. They are thinking about it. They just don't feel comfortable enough to share.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why, especially like this week, it's so important to highlight it and highlight the experiences that you've gone through. I'm so brave. Thank you. Honestly, I feel very privileged that you've shared that with me. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope it made a little bit of sense.
Oh, you absolutely did. You had me gripped.
Yes.
I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to add or wanted to say.
I think I just came in today really wanting to focus on giving a voice to these parents, because I felt so silenced. I remember feeling so silenced, and I also felt very guilty. I felt like I had done something wrong because I had failed something because my baby died. And this is a very difficult feeling to carry. And I just want to tell these parents, you have done absolutely nothing wrong and you deserve all the support that you can get. So go and find it. This is unfair that the support doesn't come your way necessarily, but the support is there. There are amazing charities that can support. And yeah, I hope that somehow, even if things feel completely desperate at the moment, I hope that somehow they can find a way to live with this pain. I often say it's like wearing a rucksack with rocks. It's full of rocks, and sometimes the rocks, you forget that you have the rucksack. It doesn't really feel that heavy, and then something else happens, and it feels like you're back to square zero, and this rucksack feels very heavy. Like the grief process is very intense, and there's no timeline on grief as well. I'm 5 years down the line, and I still think of my child every single day and wishing he was here playing with his twin sister. So be gentle, be kind to yourselves, and hopefully people who listen who aren't bereaved parents can be kind to people going through this experience, and try as best as possible not to minimize what they're going through. If you don't know what to say, then don't say anything. It's better than just offering platitudes.